Ladies and gents, welcome back to another video. Inside this package is an iPhone 6. This specific model is supposed to be running iOS 8, which, as most of you probably know, is the original version of iOS that this phone shipped with. So let's get it opened up, see if it is in fact running iOS 8, and hopefully it's in good condition. Let's begin. Alright, here is our iPhone. It is definitely an iPhone 6, and it is in the space gray color. I don't know why we've got all these stickers and stuff on it. But the front of the device is pretty dirty, so I'm going to give that a bit of a clean before we assess the condition. Alright, so the screen looks to be in average condition. It is not cracked, but there are some scratches. You can probably see there in the light. Nothing too bad. The body of the phone looks to be in nice condition. No significant dents and really no scratches at all. The back looks good as well. I'd say this phone was kept in a case but without a screen protector. Let's see if it has any power. Remember, we are expecting iOS 8 on this iPhone, so we'll see if we get that once this thing boots up. Okay, it might be dying here. We had the Apple logo and then it went black. Let's see what happens here. Yeah, so it's dead. We're going to have to let this sit for a little bit and charge before we're able to see if the iPhone is working and what iOS version it's on. All right, here is our iPhone 6. This thing has sat on the charger for quite some time, enough to get up to 100%. And check that out. We've got slide to unlock and we've got the stock iOS 8 wallpaper. Hopefully, we've got ourselves iOS 8, and we do. You can tell right away because we've got the orange music icon that was updated to be a white color in iOS 9. So before we go any further, let's head into settings here, general and about. There you can see we're running iOS 8.3. This is a 16 gigabyte model. Obviously it's space gray. This is pretty sweet. Now, one thing I'm noticing, and I don't know if this is going to show up on camera, the screen looks like it might be a little bit yellow towards the very bottom there. Kind of hard to tell. Maybe it's just my eyes, but it kind of seems like that towards the bottom there. And let me just double check. No iCloud account. That is perfect. Let's see if Touch ID is working. And it is very nice. A lot of times when people replace the display, if they cracked it, they don't transfer the home button, so you're left with an aftermarket home button with non-functional Touch ID, and in the case of the iPhone 7 and newer, a non-functioning home button because those required special components because they weren't physical buttons. But here we go, iPhone 6, iOS 8, very nice experience. This iPhone launched in 2014. This was the first time Apple increased the screen size of the iPhone since the iPhone 5. We went from a 4-inch display here on the iPhone 5 up to 4.7 on the iPhone 6 and up to 5.5 on the 6 Plus. The rear looked very much the same on both of these devices. This one's got some junk going on there. Pretty annoying. I have to peel that off. But we got ourselves a little tiny camera bump. This was the first time in an iPhone that Apple introduced the camera bump, and this is where it all began. It just barely sticks out there on the back of the iPhone. Speaking of that camera bump and looking at the iPhone from this angle, there are a few things to mention. The first of which is bend gate. This was a problem with the aluminum frame of the iPhone 6 and specifically the iPhone 6 Plus. But the frame here is so weak and the iPhone is so thin that even just having this in your pocket under certain amounts of pressure, the device would literally bend. So if I were to actually try to bend this, it would not be very difficult. Of course, I'm not going to do that, but one reason that was such a common issue was because of how thin this iPhone was. The iPhone 6 was, and still is, the thinnest iPhone of all time. There is no other iPhone thinner than this, and quite frankly, there are hardly any Apple devices thinner than this. A few just to name off the top of my head are the iPod Touch 5th generation, not this one, but the 5th gen iPod Touch. The 4th gen might be thinner. I'm not sure about that. Someone can comment down below if the 4th gen is thinner. But the iPod Nano 7th gen I know is thinner, and honestly probably every iPod Nano is thinner than this. But in terms of iPhones, this is the thinnest one Apple ever made, and the 6 Plus is the second thinnest. Now let's talk about iOS 8. Unfortunately, I don't know much about iOS 8. I'm not really sure what features came with iOS 8. I know Apple Music was launched at the very end of iOS 8, which of course this iPhone got. This iPhone got updates starting with iOS 8. It would get iOS 9, 10, 11, and 12 is where this iPhone would finish. Not the best run in the world in terms of software updates, but pretty respectable. The iPhone 6, as we have here, has a dual-core A8 chip. I believe it is a 1.4 gigahertz processor, and it is slightly better in terms of CPU performance compared to the iPhone 5S, which is what this iPhone replaced. But the graphical performance is where this phone really took leaps, and that A8 chip has brought some significant changes in terms of the ability of this iPhone to play games. Now, one thing to note, the iPhone 6 has 1 gigabyte of RAM. That is this phone's kryptonite. That is the reason that this device was not supported for more than just a few iOS updates. If we look, for example, at an iPhone 6S, we've got one right here, this iPhone has the A9 chip, which is faster than the A8, but not that much faster, and that device got a bunch more iOS updates. The iPhone 6S, of course, has 2 gigabytes of RAM, and to really hammer down that point, let's take, for example, the iPad mini 4th generation. That shares the exact same CPU. It's a dual-core A8 chip here, the same one that's in the iPhone 6. And I think this just died. Interesting. But back to that point, the iPad mini with the same CPU, but twice the memory, with 2 gigabytes instead of 1 gigabyte here on the iPhone 6, that iPad mini would get updates all the way through iOS 15. So that goes to show how much that memory limitation really held back this iPhone. And unfortunately, it just died. I'm going to have to plug that in here. The iPhone has literally been on the charger for like 30 seconds and it's saying 100%. So I'm not sure what's up with that. There's no battery health on the iPhone 6 that was introduced in... Well, I take that back. There is battery health on the iPhone 6, but it's not available because we're on iOS 8. That was introduced in iOS 11 as a beta. You can see battery is not even an option in here inside of settings. And interestingly, you still have to go to general and usage to turn on battery percentage. That, I believe this is the last iOS version that had that, because iOS 9 I know has low power mode and it has a dedicated battery tab. Well, welcome back. It's me from the future. I went ahead and connected that iPhone to my computer and I ran coconut battery. 10%, 10.8% is the battery health on this iPhone 6. You can see our full charge capacity is 196 milliamp hours. I think that is less than AirPods. I know it's less than the AirPods case. I don't know what the actual AirPods themselves have, but that is a record low. The design capacity is 1810 and the actual capacity is 196. This is brutal. Worst I've ever seen. Okay, back to the video. So the iPhone 6 is very snappy here on iOS 8. Super smooth. All the animations feel very fluid, and it's a great device. This is actually the best-selling phone of all time in the entire world, the iPhone 6. Now, the camera on this is an 8-megapixel camera. This was the last iPhone to feature that 8-megapixel lens. The iPhone 6S a year later would upgrade that to 12 megapixels and add features such as 4K video recording as well as taking live photos. The iPhone 6 was the first iPhone to feature 1080p 60 FPS video recording. The iPhone 5S could only do 1080p 30. There we go. We can turn on 60 FPS video. It had its own dedicated setting there inside of the camera settings. And you can see we've got our little 60 FPS logo there in the corner. And that's going to allow for smoother video recording, although there is no optical image stabilization here on this camera lens. So any little movement or tap is going to cause this thing to shake pretty bad. But the iPhone 6 took some pretty good pictures back in the day, and it was quite an improvement on the iPhone 5S. So before we go, let's check out these iOS 8 wallpapers. We don't get to see these that often because iOS 8 is not a common version. Lots of carryover between iOS 7. I think the new wallpapers were these ones with the dark and the light background there. I think this is kind of the stock iPhone 6 wallpaper there, but some of these look pretty nice. We even got a little carryover here from iOS 6 with our wave. Actually, a lot of these. I think, let's go with, this looks pretty good. I'm a big fan of the iOS 7 stock wallpaper. I think that looks fantastic. But there's actually a lot to choose from here. The iOS 8 wallpapers are pretty cool. And I think I used this one back when I had an iPhone 6 Plus. But there you have it. That's been a quick look here at this iPhone 6 running iOS 8.3. Almost 10 years since this iPhone came out. In the end, I think it was October of 2014. All right, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in another one of my videos.